Testing. 1 2 1 2. Testing. 1 2 3. Okay. Here we go. Yes, sir. Here we go. Okay. Here, I get it. One big red Heil microphone. Can you hear me now? Yes. Do I hear a... Never mind. Okay, we're ready? Can you see me now? Are we ready? Okay, thank you, sir. Hello, thank you. My name is Emmett Hohensee. I'm the chief engineer for Radio Waves, and I'm here to talk today about emergency communications, or how to get on the air or get ready to get on the air in an emergency. You can always reach me at emmett@radiowaves.com, and the screen was swerving, so I felt like I was about ready to fall over there for a second. No, that's okay. One of the key things in emergency communications is you never know when. Can anyone fill in the blanks? You never know when. You never know when there's going to be an earthquake. You never know when there's going to be a tornado. You never know when your house is going to fall over. Getting on the air. Things to consider. Work out an emergency plan. Quite often, especially in the amateur world, especially with several of the disasters that have happened just recently, we have a tendency of just rushing to the disaster without necessarily having all our things in a row. Or we find ourselves missing just that one thing that wasn't available, or that we didn't bring, that we didn't pack in the pack. So emergency planning. Work out a plan. And I use the word work because a lot of times most people say, I have an emergency plan. Well, the emergency plan was they thought it all through in their head, but they never put everything in place, and they never exercised it. So therefore, they really didn't have a plan. They had a really good fantasy. Practice your emergency plan. Constantly play. You can turn emergency drills into a play drill. How many times has people in the amateur world gone to field day? What is field day? Is it about the points, or is it about being able to set up your emergency radio station, get on the air, and make as many contacts as possible in as many different places as possible and in as many different ways as possible? Prepare now to make your operation a lot easier, safer, and more effective. Preparation. As you get older, you'll understand the word preparation. No, not H. But anyway, the key thing is preparation. And when we say preparation, it's not necessarily like what we thought back in the days when we were in school and we're always going through our mathematical problems or exercises or whatever to get ready to do the test. Preparation is just making sure you know what you're doing when it comes time to do it. A lot of times football players will tell you that they keep doing these drills over and over and over again. Why do you do the drill? You do the drill so that way when it comes time to do the thing in the field, it's a reflex. It's a muscle reflex. It's something that you're so familiar with, you could close your eyes and do the drill. No matter what you do to make things work on the inside, if your radiating and receiving system, the antenna or ground system, is not adequate, you will not be able to achieve the desired results. One of those things that we're always thinking about when we go into the field is, what do I do? What kind of a radio do I have? All the equipment that goes inside the shed, and we don't really take into consideration the antenna system and the ground system that we're going to be working with. The big rule of thumb is to keep it simple. Anyone remember the KISS principle? Keep it simple. Sigh. Some things to consider. When you're going in the field, how many people have said, I've got my G5 RV in a box and it's ready to go? Okay? A resonant antenna is a better antenna. Install and verify an adequate ground system. Understand the concept of grounding. There are a couple different kinds of grounds. You have the signal ground and you have a reflective ground, which really isn't a ground. It's more of a counterpoise, but we all use the same phraseology every time we go into the field. Believe it or not, these two items, the antenna and your grounding system, comprise 2/3 of the radio communication circuit. And quite often we forget that 2/3 is key. We might have a $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, $14,000 radio system, but if we don't have a decent radiator or ground system, it's not going to work, and we're going to be greatly disappointed in that wonderful investment we have. Don't rely on your autocoupler to make things work. Spend the time and bring your antennas as close to resonance as possible on the bands that you plan on working. In other words, make a resonant antenna. We'll get into the resonant antenna subject here in a second. Install a ground system. Install a resonant antenna system. 2/3 of the equation. Like I said, you have the transmitter, you have an antenna, and you have ground. You need all three of them to work. And if they're not working all together, they're not working well at all. And quite often in an emergency, we forgot something in most cases, and that would be the ground. When was the last time we actually set out radials over in a parking lot? Well, it's a good ground. We have a great ground plane here. We have whatever it is that you have in your soil. But understand this. How much would you rather reflect? 100% of the signal that hits the ground or 20% of the signal that hits the ground? A counterpoise system is always helpful when it comes time to transmit, especially when you got to get out and talk on the air. There you go. You have your basic antenna systems that you can work with, counterpoise. You'll see each one of these are counterpoise systems, including, your basically a what did I have there? Okay, basically a counterpoise system that we have set up underneath one half of an antenna. This is actually a dipole circuit that I didn't finish drawing out. The circuit goes on both ways, and we've got a counterpoise set up so that we can have a tuned system, so the antenna is more efficient. As a radio broadcast engineer, quite often what we ended up having to do, at least every 6 months, is we had to go out and do these surveys of what our signal was like. So I'd go out with a neat little instrument, and I'd measure to see that the radiation pattern of our radio tower was actually doing what it was supposed to do. And what that composed of was all these nice little radials. And one way we always found out when things were going south was when our signal started going bad, or they started putting up an FM tower in our area, or a cell tower or something like that. But the counterpoise system, regardless of the ground that you're working with, is always a helpful thing. And if you can put 4 wires out underneath your antenna, you're better off. Efficiency and reception increases as resonance increases. One thing that I used to do when I was in the military, I used to work on radar. And one of the things it was really poignant to us is that as you were tuning even the waveguide, you could see the signal increase as the resonance of the waveguide increased. You'd also notice that noise would increase as the antenna or the waveguide fell farther out of resonance. How many times have we gone someplace and just threw up, let's say, a G5 RV, and we had nothing but noise? Well, the thing is one thing about a G5 RV, and I hate to say this, is it's not really a resonant antenna, so it will be, prone to picking up whatever's in the air. Okay, it's like imagine this: you're playing a guitar, and one string is out of tune. It sounds terrible. Okay, you can't really get a tune going because that one chord is off. A lot of times we have these things called tuning devices, but back in my day, okay, right here, we had these things called tuning forks, and we would bring the guitar string into resonance with the tuning fork. And an interesting thing happens when you have the guitar string and the tuning fork come into resonance. The sound would increase considerably versus taking that same tuning fork and hitting it on a string that's not tuned. You'd still hear it. You'd still hear the components of the frequencies that you're trying to listen to, but it's not resonant, so it's not as strong. Non-resonant antennas will rarely outperform a resonant antenna. I said rarely because there are exceptions in the way we can install things. And if it's not resonant, chances are pretty slim that it's not going to work as well. And if an autocoupler is used, try to keep it as close to the feed point as possible. One of the reasons, can anyone tell me, anyone have an idea why you want to keep your autocoupler close to the antenna system versus closer to the radio? Because you end up using the ground or your coax as part of the antenna component. It becomes a radiating component. I deal with people on a regular basis who call in who want to bring their ladder line into the shack and hook it up to their 1 kilowatt amplifier. Still, now we may not think that's a bad thing, but the problem is we're exposing ourselves to a lot of energy. We make the match there, and things become inefficient. We're a lot better off if we can bring the efficiency of the circuit to the, at the point where the feed point meets the antenna, then bring it back into the shack, which means we could also create some problems with, okay, I was tuning up on 40 meters and everybody in the house or my wife's TV turned off right in the middle of that favorite show of hers. Well, needless to say, there's a good chance that you had your tuner inside the shack instead of outside the shack. Your antenna was not resonant, so you were creating RFI. And Charlie knows all about RFI. Yes. Okay, whoops. I got to back up a little bit. I'm going to make this a little bit short, but one of the things that we were talking about earlier was being prepared and getting ready. Charlie, I keep pointing you out, is you remembered what happened during the Joplin. You came in after the Joplin. Yeah, okay. Well, one of the things we ran into is we didn't have HF communications when I got there, and that was because no one really had all the stuff in place that they needed. And me being who I am, I always have at least one thing with me just about everywhere I go if it's not already mounted in my car. It's a real simple Pelican case. I can go anywhere with it. Is everything okay? Okay. As you can see, I got lots of stickers on here. I got some things from, let's see. Oh my gosh, Miami International, Ecuador. Oh, anyway, Africa. And what I've done is I've got it set up to where I can pretty much take in this box everything I need to get on the air. And I generally do have I used to carry the sealed lead acid matte batteries, but I've gone to the LiPo type batteries, which is very light. They do generate some heat, but man, I'll tell you what, I get so much out of those batteries. I don't have it here right now, but no, you have to do something. You have to do it when you get there. So, but if I'm carrying it myself, I generally bring it with me. So a couple of things I have is this really cool new Icom wheel that basically gives you the proper antenna length. All you'll do is you basically say, okay, I want to work on 80 meters, and I want to work at about 3750. A half wavelength antenna is 124 feet right there, which is kind of cool. And then I want to work on 2 meters, and I need to know what my frequency is, or the frequency is, let's see, 148 megahertz. Half wavelength, 3.3 foot 2 inches. It's kind of nice, so you can make real quick in the field. Get the resonant antenna, get things that you need in place for the frequencies that you're going to work on. Plus, it's got some really cool calculations on the back. Plus, for people who really want to get it right, is I've even put the formulas on how to figure out the right antenna length, which most people can do, but it's always a handy thing to have. The thing that I have used forever is this thing that most people, at least my age group, will know what it is. It looks like a slide rule. Well, this is a modified slide rule, which also can calculate my frequency, and then on the back I can figure out an LC circuit fairly quick. It's kind of nice. It's an engineering tool. But the other thing, a lot of things I'll pack in my box are things I know that I'm going to need to get on the air. And I generally pack a lot of stuff, so I can't be really pretty in how it looks, but I can sure get what I need. I generally carry with me about 200 feet of coax. The reason for the 200 feet of coax is I work more than one mode. I work HF, and I work VHF, and I work UHF. So I've got about 200 feet of coax with everything I need to hook up to the different devices. I've got my power cable for my radio, and what I've done, especially on the Icom radios, a lot of times when we're in the field, we don't really need 12 feet of wire. As a matter of fact, you'll notice that sometimes using 12 feet of wire, hooking it up to the battery, you'll notice as you're transmitting at 100 watts, your signal starts to sag because the wire just isn't big enough to carry the current you need to keep on. Keep the voltages where they need to be. So what I've done is I went ahead and put these really nice Anderson power poles on here. I do have fuses on the radio itself, and I made my jumper, my power cable jumper, a little bit shorter, so that way I'm not going to be wasting anything. In the field, every ounce of power you've got is what you need to get on the air and get out. Now you notice I'm just throwing it on the ground because I just want to dig through this real quick. I've got my logbook. I always carry a hand logbook. Even though we've got all these neat computers things out there in these days, I'm one of those ones that understand it, especially people like Charlie, who's lived in Guam, knows that sometimes you just don't have the internet. You don't have cell phone. You don't have all these things. So a simple notebook for keeping notes and keeping a log is the perfect thing to have. A couple 100 feet of rope. This just happens to be some camouflage Dacron rope. I keep it, keep it there. You never know what you might need it for. Suspending your antenna, tying up whatever. I've got, even though this isn't appropriate all the time, this is a ground rod. It can be a ground rod. It can be something to give me a little bit better ground than what I had before. I've also got some ground wire. It's not a lot, but it's just enough to basically help me do a little bit better job to make things a little bit cleaner. I've also got a way, you're going to say, okay, you've got all this neat stuff. Well, how in the world are you going to install this antenna? Well, I've got this really cool thing. It's my Hyper Hanger Mini. And what this does is it allows me to shoot these two different types of projectiles. This is a golf ball, which really, with just these two things and about 10-pound test, will allow me to shoot it over a couple 100 feet without having a lot of problems. You might have to play with it a couple times to get your accuracy down, but it's kind of nice. And then I've also used a tennis ball, which is nice. That way, if you get hit in the head with it, it's not going to create a dent, which I know people who, they've got a dent in their head because they got hit with a lead weight or that wrench that their buddy was standing on when they were standing on the rope trying to put the antenna up in the air. So as you can see, I've got all that. I've got a common mode choke, not an ugly choke, just a simple common mode choke. All that to help keep things down. I've got some silicone, that rubber silicone sealant tape. This stuff is great, especially if you know you're going to be in a wet environment, and sometimes it might be a beautiful morning, but it may not be by the end of the day. So wrapping up your connections are excellent. And by the way, on each one of my cables, each cable I've actually put a barrel connector on because I never know if I might not need to extend, the cable or hook it up in a different way. So I have a way of continuing or hooking up my system in just about any way I want. Anybody know what one of these things are? Anybody? Do we all need different glasses? That's a nice little Lensatic compass. One of the reasons for that is as you start working with radios and antennas and stuff like that, you get an idea of the radiation pattern, and this will give you an idea of where you need to be putting your signal. And quite often, especially in Missouri sometimes, you'll get in a place where you think north is this way, but it's really over here. And the only way you would ever know is with a compass. And I have a tendency, like I said, even though my iPhone and all the other pieces of equipment I carry with me have the ability to tell me, where I'm going, this actually has been the thing that has failed me the least. Is a nice little compass. I also carry some 80-pound monofilament line. This stuff is great. I got 300 feet of line here, and I can suspend an antenna for an indefinite period of time and do things with this that most people would think about carrying. About 1,000 feet of this stuff. Which one do you think takes up less space, and which one will do the job for me? Charlie can pretty much tell you that this is what we after the Joplin Joplin tornado. This is what we suspended our HF antenna in the air with. Is this 80-pound test rope? It did great. Lasted a couple weeks, which is all we needed. Plus, I'm able to carry a lot of this stuff. And then, of course, last but not least, my antenna. What this is an off-center fed dipole. I generally carry one of these with me all the time because it's resonant on multiple frequencies. I used to carry a G5RV, but the thing is, what's one of the inherent issues of a G5RV? It's not resonant anywhere, really. It's close sometimes, but it's not really ever resonant, whereas this antenna is resonant on multiple frequencies, and it's one wire, or two wires actually. It's an off-center fed dipole. It has a 4-to-1 current bailing in the middle, and in many cases, all I have to do is get the thing up in the air, and it's very close to being exactly where I need it to be to communicate on the emergency frequencies. Like I have a tendency of listening to the 14.3 net, which is the Waterways net or the Mariners net or whatever. I listen all the time. And being in St. Louis, Charlie, you've checked in a couple times too. It's a good place to be because you can pick up ocean or sea traffic at any time, and quite often we're the relay because for whatever reason it's not getting to the coast, it's getting to us, and then we have to relay it back to the coast again. So I've got my off-center fed dipole. It's got nice and neatly wound up. I've got a little pocket analyzer that I got from MFJ. This is kind of a nice little thing. I just basically hook it up to the antenna, plug it in, turn it on, push the button, and it'll give me an idea of where the antenna is resonant. Now, of course, this isn't always a good, how do I say it? This is one of those things in my mind that will fail me when I need it the most. So there's other tricks that you need to learn as you start using these tools to know when your antenna is resonant. Anyone have an idea of how to tell when an antenna is coming in resonance without using one of these meters, without looking at the SWR meter or anything like that? If you're going through the dial and you have your AGC turned off on your radio, the noise will increase exponentially and then drop back down again. That's most likely one of your resonant points or a co-resonant point on your antenna, and that gives you an idea that you're very close to being where you need to be. But these are fantastic tools. They're getting smaller, and it doesn't take hardly anything to use them. This uses a USB port to charge it with, and it's really nice for taking lots of good measurements. Now, last but not least, the piece de resistance. You'll notice that in my case, there's nothing there. Oh no. I've got one more thing. This is almost the same stuff I take with me like I took to Ecuador to do some engineering work. In here I have thank you. I'll just move some of this one. Can anyone tell me what radio I have with me? Oh yeah, it's an Icom 7100. The nice thing about this is I've got all my wires pretty much arranged where they need to be and as connected as possible. I've got an autocoupler, an LDG autocoupler, which of course I know it's right close to where I'm at, but guess what? Because I'm working with a resonant antenna, I really don't have to do too much. I'm just doing a match instead of trying to make the whole system look like it works. And then inside of here I've also got the simple PowerWorks switching power supply. These are nice. It's got the power poles, and it's also got the spades. This is a nice little thing to have. Then normally I also have the PowerWorks voltage conditioning. So you can set that down. Thank you very much. And what that does is allows me to hook up the battery to the power supply. And what will happen is it'll charge the battery. If the power supply gets switched off, I still have power. It switches over to the battery. It's like a UPS for 12 volts, and I love it. And of course, I've got the LDG tuner. I've got the Icom 7100. The nice thing I like about the Icom 7100 is that it is a fantastic radio. Charlie will tell you the one radio I used the most in Joplin was the Icom 7000. Well, I found a good replacement. It's the Icom 7100. I love the touch screen features. I love its ability to allow me to do everything. In other words, I don't have to carry a lot of radios. I only need to carry one for right now. I do carry other radios in an emergency, but my main radio is generally something like the Icom 7100. It's got lots of nice features. It allows me to do lots of cool things that I wouldn't normally be able to do. And by setting everything up fairly close, fairly neat, fairly trouble-free, I'm able to do this at just about any time. And this is a radio that I use almost every week. So it's not something I just put in my box and then in a couple months I hope that it's working and that I've got everything programmed right. I'm always using the radio that I'm going to go in the field with for two reasons. One, I'll know if there's something wrong with the radio. Two, it'll be programmed and I'll already know exactly what's going on in the radio as far as programming and all the features. With all the technology that we've got in radios, if you go from, let's say, this radio to, let's say, even a 706, there's a difference between how you operate the two radios. And what will happen is you'll spend a lot of your time when you're trying to get on the air trying to figure out how to use the stinking radio. And by using the radio every day or as much as you possibly can, you're familiar with the material. It's set up in such a way that you can easily put it in a case and run with it. And if not, you also have a secondary system to go with you. Anyway, this is pretty much the crux of my presentation, was just get a plan together, put your gear together. Here's a quick example of what I can do in such a small space. I normally had 2 cases too at one time, 2 small briefcases that I carried all this stuff in. I do carry a battery with me normally. I also carry a 2-meter antenna that I have. It's over at our booth. I forgot to put it in the case to see the story. Keep everything in a place where it's always there. It's ready for you, and you won't have to worry about accidentally forgetting it. Anybody have any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate this opportunity from Icom to present this. Have a good day.